Okay, cool. So, alrighty. Okay, everyone, welcome. Thank you for attending. This is the Akron Software Craftsmanship Meetup. We are based in Akron, Ohio. Context clues should have told you that. My name is Mark Harwood. I'm the host. I'm the main organizer of the Akron Software Craftsmanship Meetup. We meet once a month typically and talk about all things pertaining to software development and DevOps and things like that. We're an agnostic group. I try to, just find people in my network who I think are knowledgeable and have a great personality, and then beg them to present for me, and they're typically open to it. And I just ask them to talk about whatever they want to, whatever they're most passionate about, that kind of thing. We normally meet at Bounce Innovation Hub, which is a co-working space in downtown Akron, and I love that place, so I still mention it every single month. Due to COVID-19, I've been having just remote sessions this year, but once we return to some semblance of the legacy world, we'll probably return to Bounce Innovation Hub. So if you're ever looking for to get out of the house and have just kind of an office environment or co-working type of feel, please check out Bounce Innovation Hub. And then I'm also all about community and collaboration in the tech scene of Northeast Ohio. After I hand it off to Mike here, I will be dropping links to the Cleveland Tech Slack and the Canton Tech Slack. If you're not a member, you can join with the links I'm going to be providing. And yeah, also I work at Robert Half Technology. They are the sponsors of this group. I am the division director of our Lone Staff Consulting division, our professional service. It's a team of 15 web, mobile, and data warehouse engineers who can come in and do heavy lifting on project work for you. So if there's anything you could use an extra set of hands on, please let me know. That's the plug for my work, and we can get started. So tonight, I asked my internet friend, Michael Davidson here, if he could present on something. He's the CTO of Plainview Healthcare Partners, and he's going to be talking to us about the serverless framework, which was his gateway drug into DevOps. So Michael, take it away.
Good intro. Thank you, Mark. So yeah, I don't have to say the title again. Let's just jump into who I am a little bit. So I have a fancy title now, but I'm the sole developer working on again, I kind of jazz it up here, stealth tech startup, AI technology, whatever. It's another, CRM for medical billing purposes, and I don't mind talking about it at all. I'm a lot less secretive than I lead on. Maybe not. So I started out as a full stack developer, and I had no interest at all in DevOps. I had no clue what it was. I mean, obviously, you have to put your code somewhere. I was sitting up, late at night on deployment calls with the dev team at, while I watched them copy paste some files onto IIS, and I thought this was horrible, and kind of was, but that's the name of the game at the time. So I never had an interest in it. I went to a conference, the O'Reilly conference in San Francisco, that my company graciously sent me out to. I saw a talk from the serverless team. Serverless, I'm going to explain in a second. I'm not assuming any product knowledge of this for this talk. I'm kind of making no assumptions other than you're somewhat familiar with development life cycles and stuff like that. So when I saw them talk, I didn't really think of anything of it, but I went home and I tried it anyway. I was like, okay, that was pretty flashy. I'm going to give it a try. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. And the coolest thing about it to me was that the hosting is pretty much free, and it's really, really easy to do based on their framework. At the end of this, I'm going to give a demo and pray to the demo gods that the demo works nicely. But the theme of the demo is serverless in one click. And by one click, I mean a couple clicks. And again, I'm lying to you. But we do have a demo at the end. So there's a link to the tech Slack. The Cleveland Tech Slack is great. Everybody please sign up for that. It's free. I fart around on there all day. Don't tell my boss. So when I started with the serverless framework, that's kind of when I got into AWS. That's when I kind of got into DevOps. And I was like, okay, now I actually have some familiarity to this. And later on, I actually transitioned into a DevOps engineer role. And now I just do whatever I do. Again, super secret. Not really. So what is serverless in general? That's a really, really dumb name, in my opinion. It's a concept that it's basically as far away from the concept of a server as possible. So traditionally, a server is you have a either physical or cloud server, and you put your files on there, and you run a web server on it, like a program called a web server that runs your files all the time. So basically, there's at least 2 or 3 steps there. There's make the server, make it publicly accessible, make it have a web server on it, and then put your files on there. So serverless is a concept that you basically don't have to worry about that first step. You don't have to worry about setting up a traditional server, whether it's on premises or in the cloud. You don't have to worry about that at all. You just put your code up somewhere, and it will run because somebody else is worrying about the server stuff. I do still say it's a silly name, but it's kind of accurate. I'll let you guys debate that. So what's the appeal? So this is where I jump right into the numbers. This is why it's so awesome, because you can run it 1,000,000 times and it will cost you 20 cents. There's also some stuff around that. I'm lying to you again, but the actual compute will cost you 20 cents to run it 1,000,000 times in a normal environment. And I'll talk about billing later. But billing in the cloud and billing in AWS is a nightmare, but that's something that I do plan to touch on. Why do you need 1,000,000 versus 2,000,000 versus 20? What does that actually mean? That means those are the actual times that you invoke your function. So you put your code up there, it's however many times you run that code. So really what you're only paying for is what you use. So if you only have traffic at 2 p.m. each day, or if you only have traffic from 9 to 5 each day, you're only going to be charged from 9 to 5. You're only going to be charged for what people actually use. So you don't have to turn off your servers at night or something like that and then worry that you're going to miss any traffic. You don't have to really do any of the scaling. That leads me right into my next point. This can actually scale really, really easily to millions of requests. You just let it go. They worry. By they, I mean the different serverless cloud providers, not just AWS. There's a whole variety. They worry about the actual scaling behind the scenes of the actual hardware. So you can just worry about your code, which is actually pretty cool. I'm like, okay, wow, maybe there is something to this. So there's also another big benefit, and this is to me, this is a really big deal, because they're also really easy to maintain. And if somebody transitions from a job, or you just get there, if you see a serverless thing, you can generally figure it out because you can just read the code. That's like the document of how it works. With just random on-premises servers or cloud servers, you have to go in and figure it out. Oh, is it running Nginx? Oh, is it running a different web server? Is it running some web server you've never heard about, like let's say, for instance, Node or PM2, or you can try to basically backwards reverse engineer the server and try to figure out what exactly it's doing. And then if it's a production server, God knows if you touch anything, it could just explode. So that's the difference with serverless, is that you actually don't have to worry as much about maintainability, because you know exactly what it does. Basically, the contract is all there. So that's a huge benefit for teams. So I'm not sure when I say this, but this is the, while I am pitching serverless for certain applications, this is not for everything. I don't know if I say that later or not, but the serverless framework, or just serverless as a concept in general, is not for every single application. I think I'll talk about that later, but I'm not sure. So what is the serverless framework? So I mentioned serverless as a concept as not using a traditional server infrastructure. So the serverless framework is it's a tool. It's basically a program that you can run, that runs off of something called a file type called YAML, which is a type of config file that you can run. You can basically throw at this program and it will deploy everything to the cloud or destroy it. So you can easily just send your files upstairs, or bring them back downstairs, or delete them, or whip up something from the example library. And that's part of what I'm going to show you at the end, but we will get to that. So it comes with a lot of features by default. It comes for the AWS categories. It comes with CloudWatch logs, so your logging will automatically work. It can come with an API gateway, which is like actually setting up an API in front of your function. So you can actually just, depending on the rules that you give it, you can actually just have a production program running just by running serverless deploy. It will build a S3 bucket, which is where it deploys your code initially, and then it will look at the code. Basically, it takes care of a lot of the, it does some heavy lifting for you behind the scenes. So, and then the main part of this is the AWS Lambda, which is in the AWS version, that's the actual function. Lambda, also a fancy name, that's the actual function where that's your code. That's the thing that you run. So that's a little intro into the serverless framework. Hopefully I explained that nicely, but it's a program that you run basically. So what's your point? So why do I care about any of this, Michael? You know, you're just boring me to death. So the serverless framework will let you get either a test or production or whatever. It'll let you get something out there extremely quickly, as I hope to show you. You can pull examples down really easily, and then, you know, more than just like a git pull, if you're familiar with git, it actually can configure some stuff for you based on the settings that you give it. You can actually have a set it and forget it kind of like developer portfolio, if that's kind of your thing, if that's what you're looking at, and it's basically always going to be either free or close to free, as long as you know you're not going to get hacked. And there is, I believe, automatic DDoS protection, if anybody was wondering about that. Don't quote me on that if there isn't. I believe that there is. I think that there is, but I'm not 100% sure. And then another nice thing is you can actually, instead of worrying about the different web servers and how for different languages, you can actually just throw one of these selected languages upstairs and it will work. So you don't have to worry about like whatever the latest and greatest web server for Java is. If your boss says, hey, we need a Java project, you don't have to worry about let's say like .NET, you don't have to worry about Node, you don't have to worry about those kind of things. You just throw the code upstairs and it will, as long as you know, get it a little bit right, it will just work. And I feel kind of cringy saying that, but that is kind of the point here. So I know I mentioned AWS. There are a lot of different cloud providers that that it hooks up to automatically. You can configure these through the config file, the YAML config file. Somebody mentioned earlier why YAML over JSON. That I think I'm going to answer after class, if there's even an answer that I know, but it is a personal preference. I think you actually can use JSON, by the way. But anyway, you can use all of these different cloud providers, and all of these different languages are built in out of the box except for PHP. And I do have a beautiful horror story for how I got PHP to work in AWS Lambda. But if you want to just take a second and take this all in, you got Go, Node.js, Python, Java, Ruby, Swift. Is that right? Okay, I copy pasted this from somewhere, but I guess it supports Swift. .NET Core, and then PHP it doesn't support that natively, but it does, as far as I know, support the rest natively. It does not support normal .NET framework, which a lot of you, statistically at least, being in Ohio, work in. So it would support .NET Core, but not the full-fledged .NET framework. I do see a comment, but I'm just going to continue for now. I'll come back to that at the end. All right, the horror story. All right, prepare your greatest fears, your greatest, get ready. So I was given a task, take this legacy PHP code. It wasn't a lot. It was not like a gigantic chunk of PHP code. It was pretty straightforward, and it was still just not worth it to convert it into a different language, because I just did not have the ability to work out all of the different use cases. So, test all the different use cases and completely rewrite it. So we were like, we do not want to run PHP on an actual server. We really don't want this running on a server, because we don't have to worry about it, because we were hoping that it was going to be high bandwidth, like high usage. So we decided to take a look into doing it the serverless way. So I did find a PHP code example from the examples of the serverless framework, and I think I might have this later on. I'm not sure, but you can find these things. There are people who've been there before. It's already the framework's already a little bit mature enough that you can kind of expect a lot of the issues have already been figured out. So there were people already doing this before, and the way that it worked under the hood, here's the evil part, is that it was a Node.js application that called a PHP binary that I manually put onto the server. It was a pretty gnarly thing if you really think about it, but it totally worked. And then from the PHP binary, I would just call the rest of the application. And every API call would just create a new instance of that PHP call, and that was it. There are some restrictions. Under the hood, Lambda, I know I'm saying a lot of buzzwords really quickly, so if you're really flustered, I'm sorry. AWS Lambda, under the hood, it runs a virtual Linux image, and it's really, really locked down. The actual technical Linux version it's Amazon Linux, they call it. And I don't even think it's Amazon Linux 2. There's 2 versions of it. I think it's really the first one, but they really, really lock it down, and it comes with some built-in fancy Linux stuff. But if you want anything other than what it comes with, you have to actually put the files directly into the main folder. Otherwise, you can't touch anything out of that. So no matter how fancy you get, you can't outsmart them. You can't do crazy things to get out of the environment. As far as I know, maybe you're a crazy hacker and you're really cool, but you're a little bit above me in that case. But that's my PHP horror story. here we have some drawbacks. So what am I not telling you? So here's what I'm not telling you. The big thing is you can't hand import any custom resources. So if you say, hey, I wanted another S3 bucket, I totally forgot to put it in my YAML file, and then you want retroactively to add that into there, you can't. You just straight up can't. The developers at the time, this is a couple of years ago, unless they changed their minds recently, they decided they did not want you to be able to update the state. So if you've used something called Terraform, this might be something that's very, very familiar with you, where you import things into your active state. So like if you make a new production server and your old one is kind of like hanging, you know what I mean? In serverless, if your production environment, if you replace it in production, like let's say something really goes wrong and you replace it on the fly, bad news, you're also going to have to deal with the old one or recreate this. It can actually be pretty annoying if you have that issue. So if you do want to use this product, I would recommend kind of keeping it limited. And if you do want to add something in the infrastructure, make sure to add it in the file. Otherwise, you can't add it later, or you'd have to recreate it. It also runs CloudFormation under the hood. CloudFormation is a infrastructure as code tool. I know I'm going very, very, very fast here, but infrastructure as code is kind of the same thing as serverless. I mean, serverless uses infrastructure as code under the hood to do all of the magic. And CloudFormation is the actual magic that it does. So you just got to be aware that some of the gotchas you have with CloudFormation, you also have with serverless. So one time I was trying to fix that issue I was just describing, where I had created something in production, but I wanted it to be in my actual infrastructure as code. I had to delete the production thing and re-upload it. But here's the nasty part. It actually got stuck. So for about a half hour, I was just waiting there, like biting my fingernails, just wondering when it's going to finish up. And I was just not a good time if you have customers waiting. But basically, that's a drawback that you want to consider if you're going to use this. And there's also a drive space limit. So, and there's also, more importantly, a run limit. So if you want something that's going to run for more than 15 minutes, that's a no-no. Sorry. It's something that you're just not going to be able to do in Lambda unless you chain them. Now you can chain them. I'm throwing out so many things. Sorry, everybody, if I'm missing something that you wanted to hear. And I mean, that's it. So I mean, if anybody has any questions, I'm about to do a little demo. Let me just do the demo. Hopefully, it'll be a 2-second demo, and then let me stop sharing my screen. Let me share. Just a moment. All right, everybody can see this?
Yep.
All right, so I made a repo.
Oh, Michael, real quick.
Sure.
If someone wanted to, would they be able to follow along with this, or is there like some initial setup that would need to be done?
Great question. That's exactly what I'm showing here. This is the exact setup that you would need to already have in order to run this demo, is these 5 steps. Let me share this in the chat. This is the repo. I gave this at a local trade school called Gesher. Why isn't the chat popping up? I'll just show it off. I'll just share it in a second. But I mean, this is the URL. It's public. So I downloaded this. So let's say you've already ran all the prereq stuff. You just download the project and you run this PowerShell file. I do not have this for Mac or Linux yet, but I just have this run this file. So ignore this folder. This was my first demo here. You just run with PowerShell. It's going to pop up. It's going to ask for your name. Just going to put Davidson. Just wait a sec. So now it is downloading the example. It is making a folder. It is adding it there, and it is deploying it using my AWS credentials. So it's creating a CloudFormation stack, creating a bucket. I mentioned that in the talk. If you give it a hot second, it should create everything else too. And then we'll just look inside and we'll see that it's active.
While we wait on this, earlier, Sean said, I believe YAML is a superset of JSON such that any valid JSON file is also a valid YAML file, but not vice versa.
Interesting. Gonna have to look into that. I have a very low bar here for questions and answers that I can give and receive. Sorry, everybody. I sort of claim to be an expert, but not really. I'm just used to running the config files. So those are two types of config files. I guess while this is running, I can show you an example. Sometimes you can spell it YAML, sometimes YML, doesn't really matter. All of the pound signs are comments. So the only thing that we're actually having here is Node.js, and the provider here is AWS, and then the runtime, that version of Node.js. Then I'm deploying this function, just hello world, and I'm giving it a API endpoint, just a generic API endpoint to check on it. So I did run this earlier. I didn't like this earlier. It won't even let me upload this old version of Node.js. I could either figure it out or not, but I'll just grab another example I have sitting. So if you run this and I do update it, it will deploy all of these things into your AWS account. It will give you an API that you can actually use, and then you can just enter it into your browser and it'll just say hello world or something. And then it'll be like, hey, do you want to delete this? And you'll just hit enter and it'll delete it. So under the hood, that's like two different commands. That's it. All you have to do basically is run serverless deploy, and then to delete, it's just serverless remove. So besides all of this fancy schmancy PowerShell stuff, that's basically all you have to really worry about. Is you just have to have that YAML file, you have to have all this stuff installed, and then you just run serverless deploy. So I should have an example here from earlier. A while ago. So this is what the AWS Lambda area looks like. In this case, this is my this is my function. It just returns go serverless, yay. So how do I invoke this? You may be asking. It will deploy an API. So one of my points is that the AWS interface is really scary. Like, oh my God, look at all this. But if you go through, looks like I still have one active. If you go through with serverless and stuff like that, these different infrastructure as code tools, I feel like you might have an easier time figuring out what the heck all of these services are. And you don't need to know all of the services. There's only a couple that you really need to think about. So I'm going to test this function I had from a while ago. Did that say error log? Oh, it says hello from Lambda. Okay, so this API pointed to Lambda, and this is a live API that you can call and use. So, you know, if you wanted just like some sort of simple thing that sent you the time, or it sent you something from a database, or, you know, did some calculation and sent it back to you, you know, that's all you'd have to do is just configure it. Okay, so that is my demo. Could have gone a little better, but well, you know, that's what happens when the demo gods, you know, aren't on your side. But that's it. So, any questions?
Is it part of the configuration file what cloud platform you're targeting?
Yes, exactly. Let me. Yeah, I went extremely quick in this. I went like a mile a minute, but in the serverless.yaml file, that is where you pick the cloud platform, and depending on your command line like credentials, that is, you could just instantly just pick a different one and go with that. So, I mean, if you've used Terraform, you'll be very familiar with this kind of stuff. I love Terraform. That's for a different use case, in my opinion. I feel like for serverless applications, the serverless framework is a little bit better in some ways, as long as you're really limiting it. But for your entire infrastructure, stuff like that, I'd definitely check out Terraform. Little plug here. Let's see if my site's still up. I made a open source tool that lets you build Terraform scripts. Like for AWS, for example, let's say you wanted to make, I don't know, an instance. So while this is kind of just for this is kind of just for show right now, but let's say you wanted to go in and fill all this stuff out, this would generate for you a valid EC2 instance from Terraform. So I mean, this is completely separate. This is completely just export it. So see, this is JSON. To whoever wanted the JSON really badly, this is a different tool, but in this I'm using JSON, which actually is probably the wrong thing to use, but you can convert that to the right config language. But this is definitely not the point of this session. Just a little, you know, plug for my open source tool. But yeah, you can, and oh, the reason I brought that up. Here's the reason I brought that up. I've got like, I don't know, I think over 100 providers over here. So let's say you wanted a DigitalOcean droplet. Oh, yeah, yeah, you could do that too. So this is a Terraform script builder called it TerraParty. I worked pretty hard on this a while ago, but I haven't really touched it in a long time. But this is a Terraform script builder, but for serverless, we use YAML, YML, and here's where you would pick the provider. And you can check out different examples of this. The serverless docs, they are pretty solid. Just serverless.com. God, I can't say that with a straight face. Serverless is, I still think it's a silly name. I'm sorry, everybody over there who've worked incredibly hard and done really good stuff in my opinion. But like they have different different examples for all these. Well, here's the CLI reference, the guides. This is my best friend user guide, and then the actual YAML lookup. So this is like a nice little guide to all this. Those examples though, those live here, and they have a nice little search. And you can roll some cool stuff out pretty quickly. So, you know how it used to be, I mean, this isn't the perfect comparison. I am definitely just completely picking and choosing things just to make a point. But, you know, it used to be like it used to take weeks to set up a server, and you'd have to hire the contractors and consultants and whatever in order just to set up a simple API that, I don't know, sends an email. You know, now you can just go in here, grab one of these examples, at least in theory, and just run serverless deploy, and you've got a production environment, or by default it's development environment, but you know, pretty much a production environment. So that's why I think it's pretty cool. And also, I mean, again, don't quote me on this one either, but it's practically free. Like, you're just not going to have to worry, in my opinion, about paying any ridiculous amount of money for whatever you use with this kind of thing. Like, I've had this for years. Like it said, I uploaded this in 2018. I guess that's years. Feels like even more years, but like I don't think I've paid a red cent on that. So I mean, that's pretty good.
We have 2 more questions in the chat. The first one was, just for the sake of following along, what part of your demo failed?
Oh, sure. Let me show you. I do love to show you when I fail. So when it was deploying, let's see if it did it the second time. So this is one from way earlier. I know I'm just showing you a gigantic wall of text, and I'm like, hey, look, this is obvious, but I know that it's not. This is from way before the demo. I didn't even set up the AWS credentials, and that is a step that I had to do as a prereq, so it didn't even run the deployment at all. Let me find the other one. So this one still thinks it's going, but it's not going to. Like I said, CloudFormation, sometimes it does get stuck. And this one, the problem with the code that I tried to deploy, and this was before the demo as well, they don't allow you to use Node.js 8.10 anymore. It's way out of date. Now they're forcing you, oh man, I'm way behind. They want you to use Node 12 at the least. Or I think it still supports Node 10, but basically my Node version is really old. So if I did this, and you can watch me fail again. If I just go in here, edit it, leave me alone. I just set the runtime to what it suggested. No, wait. Now it should work. I mean, I'll just run it. I don't know if it'll. Davidson demo Node 12. It's like, oh, I can't find that folder because I checked already. So now it's downloading the project. the actual code. And the code is just this JavaScript file, this Node.js file that just says like hello world or something. When you hit the API, it replies with go serverless, your function executed successfully. So I think that this is cool if you're in a low stakes environment or even a high stakes one with a lot of traffic, but you don't have to do a lot of updates with the whole team. I think that this is a pretty good way to get something out there really easily without having to worry about servers and DevOps people and contractors and sorry, Mark, all the contractors and different development teams and stuff like that. And this is looking a lot better. See, it's creating the API gateway. So it worries about a lot of this crap. I mean, amazing stuff that you don't have to worry about the IAM role. So AWS is a lot of permission stuff. This is technically part of my demo because IAM is the permissions area in AWS. God, I'm saying so many acronyms. So before I say too many more acronyms and your brains drip out your ears, let's just hope that this finishes and I'll stop talking. Anybody have any other thoughts?
Yeah. The other question in the chat was, how about secure authentication for serverless APIs?
Mm-hmm. So let's say you wanted to implement, I think that there's actually, did I just see an example for, so it depends what authentication you mean. If you mean like on the API level. So right now, yeah, this is open to the entire world. Where is it? Apologies if I'm just like kind of winging it right now, but you can limit this. I've done this before. Maybe I don't know how in the middle of a demo, but you can enforce API keys. I know there's a lot of that where you can say, hey, excuse me, if you don't have an API key, get out of here. And that's kind of nice because the whole world doesn't have access to what you're doing. As far as like deeper authentication methods, I think it does support, still going. Like I said, CloudFormation kind of, it is what it is. Where's my, so like you can have like API keys that you require as like a header. You can also use something called Amazon Cognito or AWS Cognito. That's more for like user stuff. I think that there's even a Active Directory plugin. That I am not your Active Directory guy. I do some things with it, but not very much at all. But there are, Active Directory use cases for that. So as far as authentication, you do have some built-in stuff. There's obviously at the source code level, you could worry about authenticating, the usual way. And nope, still waiting. Okay, so
I don't know.
yeah, I don't know what happened there. Oh, damn it. It took the code from my GitHub repo. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for a minute here. Let's take a look at the chat. OWASP, yeah. OWASP, yeah. OAuth, yeah, the good stuff. Definitely if you're worried about, oh, these are great. Thank you so much. I think it said Scott. Thank you so much, Scott. Yeah, Cognito. Everybody here is way ahead of me. It's nice being, giving a place, and I'm the schlub. But nice, yeah. I mean, we all do to an extent, but some more than others. Some are better than others. Oh, this is great. Wow, really good resources. So is that the last question? Did I miss anything? Let's see. I plan on fixing this one-click demo, which, as we've already seen, has been more than one click. I think I can fix it actually on the fly, but I don't want to make you all stick around for that alone.
Did anyone have any additional questions? Anything pop up as Michael's been talking about the last two?
Hey Mark, it's Eric. I do. Michael, thanks for doing the presentation. This is great. This is actually informative. Just a quick question, more kind of like opinion based. You know, you mentioned, you know, obviously there's the benefit, there's the cost benefit, being able to kind of whip out an API, you know, not platform infrastructure dependent or, you know, code dependent, so whatever you want to throw out there. How would you compare, like, you know, using this kind of code as infrastructure approach to, like, say, another option where you can leverage Docker containers and Kubernetes? You know, so if I have a cluster, I can throw out any kind of container I need on any infrastructure and whip together APIs across a broad range of languages. How would you compare that approach to, like, you know, what you're presenting here?
So this is not containerized generally. A lot of the container stuff probably is better in Terraform. As far as like actual Kubernetes, I don't have a ton of Kubernetes experience myself, to be honest. Maybe I should have gotten that out there before you all wasted so much time with, you know, somebody who doesn't know Kubernetes. But I've used ECS, which is a Docker-based, you know, AWS is ECS, which is a Docker-based container-based, and Fargate. That's a part of ECS. You can basically just take your containers, your Docker containers, and just put them in ECS. And I've done that through Terraform a bunch of times. Doing that for so I do have a thought on that. If you have a long-running service, I would suggest, you know, if you don't want to spend the time creating a real deep like AMI pipeline, I'm sorry if I lost everybody, but I'm just kind of gonna go and answer this one. If you don't want to spend a lot of time creating like an AMI pipeline, like using Packer or something like that, I would suggest for ECS, for a long-running task, I would suggest ECS with just Fargate, because if you're scaling down to 0, which is something that you can do with it, then, you know, you don't have it running all the time. It's kind of just worth it just using Fargate, because then you don't have to worry about startup stuff with your servers. So let me take a step back. With ECS, there's two different types of provisioning. You can either use a EC2 instance, or you can use something called Fargate, which is just their that's AWS's servers running your container on their infrastructure. And for long-running tasks, I'd say for sure use Fargate, in my opinion, because you don't have to worry about half the stuff. But if it's like an actual server that you want to stand up for a long time, and you don't want to use Kubernetes, or you have somebody like me who doesn't know Kubernetes, there's a lot less complication, I've been told, with ECS rather than Kubernetes. You can use EC2 and just have it live forever, or not. But did that answer your question or no?
Yeah, it was mostly opinion. I mean, obviously, you know, with the serverless, you can deploy really fast, you know, and that's the key. Once the cluster's set up, you can deploy fast as well, you know, so, you know, there's more complexity up front.
Yeah.
It is set up, then you're kind of good to go. And I mean, obviously the cost factor, you know, that goes in. What you represented here is that, you know, even throwing something out there, just kind of winging it up and just to see where you're at. I mean, you can't compare on the cost, but in terms of like just deploying infrastructure quickly, which is the primary goal. I was curious on your thoughts on the comparison of the two. That's primarily what it was.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I do think that serverless is obviously pretty quick as far as getting something out there and deploying really quickly. As far as like a long running task, yeah, you could. God, there's this. I have to plug where I heard all this stuff about ECS and Fargate. It was actually on Linux Academy. I'm a big fan. Wait. All right, so I'm a big nerd. That's the nerdiest thing I've ever done in my life. Maybe not. Don't believe me. It's fine. They just had this amazing infrastructure that you could scale down. And by the way, this worked this last time. So now I can finally complete this demo. Okay, get ready. Hold on to your socks. Oh yes, we got a JSON payload. Hooray! That said, go serverless. Woo! Party.
All right.
Yeah, so it finally worked. Okay, so I'm definitely gonna stop sharing. So with, I really hope I'm not just dancing around your question and not answering it at all. But let's say you're a project manager and you tell your devs, hey, I saw the serverless talk. I know you can deploy in 2 seconds. It's not necessarily that easy, and especially since every situation is a little different. And you can get a lot of stuff out of the YAML file. You can build a lot of stuff, and you can you can take that YAML file and you can actually like keep going with it. Like you can make your whole infrastructure on that. I wouldn't recommend that. I'd recommend Terraform for general purpose things, such as my ECS pipeline that I was talking about with Linux Academy, for long running tasks that you can scale to 0 using like monitoring, what's it called, monitoring? CloudWatch monitors and CloudWatch events, and scaling up and down on different, let's say like you use a queue as your source of truth, like, hey, do I still have things to process? No? Okay, so I'm going to sleep. I know I'm going a million miles a minute, especially, if you're new to AWS, you're probably like, oh my God. But, there's a lot to see. Definitely more than the amount of time that I've had to talk about it. Anyone can pick my brain on Slack. Hit me up on Cleveland Tech Slack. That's a big tip.
Another question in the chat. Have you ever deployed to Lambda on Edge?
So Lambda on Edge, what they do, I haven't personally used it, but I know what it does, and I've used their CDNs. So if I'm not mistaken, Lambda on Edge is also, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's a pretty expensive use case, but it is something super cool that you really can't easily do with other infrastructure. It will take your Lambda function and it will send it around the world, and instead of somebody in Japan trying to ping your Lambda in the United States, they'll actually have a locally sourced homegrown Lambda there, which is a copy of your main one. So at edge means just literally these edge locations around the world. So it might not do it to every single one. Don't quote me on that either. But it is a really cool way to do some sort of like small amount of processing around the entire world. But it does come at a cost, and so does the rest of the content delivery network, the CDN that Amazon or anybody else uses, except for Cloudflare. Check out Cloudflare if you want to do a free CDN. But Lambda at Edge is super cool because, if you have customers in Japan, if you have customers in, I keep saying Japan, but Australia, China, anywhere. Maybe China. Don't quote me on that either. But most of the places around the world, you can get a lot better performance using Lambda at edge. At least that's what they say. I have not personally had that use case. Yeah.
So Daniel Massey said, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I apologize if I messed that up. They said, I've been getting into both serverless and Fargate. With Fargate, I've used my own auth and RBAC, etc., versus Amazon's Cognito and user pools.
So you're ahead of me then. As far as implementing authentication on, the actual service level, I usually just do that on the application level. But you're way ahead of me as far as implementing it on the top of those. But that's cool. All right, I see the next question. Mark, do you want to read it? Give you some.
Yeah, I'm involved. When you author a Lambda with API gateway, do you recommend handling all REST verbs in one Lambda or write individual Lambda functions for each of the REST verbs?
Great question. Yeah, I do cheat, and I use one. Usually, I use one endpoint with like the mode. I do something that probably not the recommended way, but it's worked for me. I will take the mode that I prescribe, because if you're giving somebody access, I think that they have access to every endpoint. But I just do like a very like generic endpoint. I say, hey, in either the body or the URL parameters, give me the mode. I check for, if the mode is endpoint 1, endpoint 2, endpoint 3, and then I'll just run the subset of functions in there. So yeah, so as far as like all the REST verbs, I'll put it as a get, I'll put it as a post. I just check all of the event body, and it should give you everything. I don't remember if it offhand if it converts everything into body parameters. If I'm not making any sense, you kind of just got to like look at how it comes in. But I do kind of cheat. I kind of don't go crazy with the extra REST verbs. I just kind of like, just have one endpoint kind of, and just say, hey, whatever mode it is, that's what we're gonna do. That I like that because you can kind of just focus on the application. And I mean, you do have to parse out however the data comes in. It really depends how it comes in, but you're either JSON encoding it or decoding it or something like that. Sometimes it comes in on like a body tag in the event object, and sometimes it doesn't. I assume you're familiar with these things, just from the awesome question. But that's what I do. Do you have any better suggestions? What do you do? If you want to share, not, that's cool.
It's mostly like I was asking about the REST verbs because pretty much like, it's whatever you're comfortable with. So like if you might have something non-trivial, which might merit splitting it up that way. Or like you mentioned, like it might be a simple endeavor, maybe you're just kind of kicking around the tires, a little bit.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to just kind of house it all in like one Lambda and then just let it rip, So basically,
Yeah.
So it's basically more like an architectural, like, preference, more like.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a style guide yet.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I don't know if there's anything like. I just remember like John Papa. He was amazing with the style guide for Angular 1.
Yeah.
Like people with their style guides super comprehensive and opinionated, but sometimes it's really nice to see that somebody's really thought about it. And as you can see, I've only thought about it to an extent of, hey, I'm gonna just open up the whole REST verb thing and
Then
let it go.
another thought I had, basically, at AWS, it's AWS specific, but basically they have a product called Step Functions that kind of works
Yeah.
with Lambda. I've heard that step functions can be used for long running processes, and
Yeah.
I just wondered offhand, like did you have a chance to like play with them, or kind of configure them in a serverless app, like
You're
in addition to like your usual lambdas?
you're nailing you're hitting the nail on the head.
Oh, okay.
I spent a long time working with step functions.
Okay.
So when you run again, I'm just going to be very AWS specific. When you run when you run a AWS Lambda function, it's completely stateless. So you don't have, it's not going to wait for something to happen. And especially if you're doing something like infrastructure related using the Boto AWS library, which is the best, by the way. With the AWS Boto library, and and I'll share it with the class. Boto 3. Did I just message myself? Oh my God, so cool. Boto 3. Boto 3 lets you do anything in AWS as long as you have the permissions. And it's a stateless API call. So what I was doing, we had a very, 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 very touchy application. And I mean, it was so touchy. This was something I felt like I couldn't do with a normal CI/CD pipeline. And we were doing CI/CD for this pipeline, for this application, and I had to like wait for it to do a whole bunch of stuff. But the problem was Boto and Lambda are stateless. So it would shoot off a request to turn off a server, and I don't know when it's actually going to do the thing. It might take, a minute, might take 3 minutes, might take 10 minutes. Really don't know. So I was like, how am I going to keep checking if it's done or not? And this is backwards. It's not the best way to do this. And now they actually have something that does make an AWS Lambda stateful, meaning that you can actually wait for a result. But back then, you didn't have that. And so I used step functions to just constantly just check. And yes, I'm doing this, but I was just constantly checking if the thing was done. As in, like, if the server was shut down, if the server was brought online, if the code was deployed, if the application's online. I was just constantly just using step functions to go back and forth between a deployment lambda and the step functions, and back and forth. And it was a way to manage the state. It's not the best way to manage the state, but that is something that I've done before. It is it's a way. It's a thing you could do.
Right.
Again, AWS actually has a style guide, and I haven't read it, but me talking about style guides. Oh, I love style guides. Oh, haven't read this one, but I do not think that they would recommend that. I've taken, I have 2 AWS certifications, but the one that I'm studying for, like, they're all for using the CodeStar tools, if you're familiar, like code build, code deploy, code pipeline. They're great. They're really great. At the time, I felt like they weren't full feature enough for this application, but the step functions thing, it was a dirty workaround that worked really great. I was just like, just keep checking for an hour. Just check every minute. Oh, it found it? Okay, we can move on. So it worked. So that was my experience with step functions. You got me.
Another thought that I feel like might be applicable for everybody, all participants, might be maybe like a few words about the AWS serverless application model, like informally known as SAM. Like, they call it just like SAM for fun, but
Mhm.
just wanted to, ask you, like, if you had like some advice on that side, because, they apparently they have a CLI that allows you to just kind of, develop Lambda functions locally and stuff. And I'm just curious, like, it extends CloudFormation service,
Yeah,
yeah. So just
I think
wondered
I've
if
seen
you
that.
had your hands on that at all, or, they just call it like serverless application model is what the acronym stands for.
Oh, that's like the AWS, not the AWS version, but
Yeah.
it's kind of the AWS version. The AWS CLI is awesome. And you can actually use serverless framework locally. At least they call it locally. It might be actually running somewhere, but I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. But you can invoke it locally. That's one of the things you can do from the serverless framework. But I haven't used much of AWS's actual. I see what you're talking about. They also have a new infrastructure as code um, framework. AWS just came out with a new infrastructure as code framework called CHK, SHK. I don't know offhand. I'm sorry, but it is. It's a lot of people think that it's a little bit better than CloudFormation, but generally, I'm still a big Terraform fan. Um, that's an entirely different subject, but that I keep bringing up. But you do need to talk about the options a little bit. At least I feel. But I haven't used AWS's homegrown serverless framework. I guess I would dare to call it that, um, if you will. Yeah. G, do you got anything else?
No, I mean, just wanted to share that because, from an AWS standpoint, I'm kind of pretty familiar with, at least like what they have to offer. Not to say that I've actually used most of these, tool sets myself. Like I just kind of bring it in and out whenever, it comes in and into
Yeah,
play.
we're here to have fun. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
we're just here, just kind of talking shop here. Like, yeah, the
yeah,
old car talk days. Like, okay, that's a old show that's no longer available. Wish we
yeah.
could
Well,
recreate that.
if only
But
we
yeah,
could meet up in person, but
yeah,
maybe next time.
yeah, absolutely. And and it intrigues me. Like, most of the cloud vendors have like similar offerings. So like on GCP side, like what exists, Azure side, what exists that's similar to, like, serverless is agnostic, like from a tech standpoint, like it's just a prescription based thing
Yeah,
more than anything, the YAML style. um, but the implementation on the ground, on the street, like that's where it kind of gets like, okay, what do you do? AWS may have a more stronger story there, but it always like is intriguing to me, like how other practitioners use serverless in their contexts. So
yeah. And
mhm.
I mean, there's a few of us,
Yeah.
around the Cleveland area.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's all I had.
That kind of leads into another question I had, which is, do you have a sense of how agnostic the YAML configuration is? For example, you know, if you had several Lambda functions set up and you wanted to move them to a different provider, is it just a matter of changing the provider in the configuration, or are there other aspects of the configuration that are specific to AWS or GCP, et cetera?
Um, Allegedly, that's the goal. I haven't just picked up and moved one yet, but that's what they say. But there is a whole section of this that I don't think it converts one to one. That's the whole events section. That's usually just the cloud provider that you're working on. And also, obviously, all of the custom CloudFormation stuff that you build into the thing. I don't know if people do more than one cloud provider in one YAML file. That'd be pretty cool, pretty intense. But God, I think people have been talking about this for a while. But I think people were talking about, you know, depending on your use case, I think that there's an equation that you can do. It's like, would I save money by just lifting and shifting from one cloud provider to another? And how cool would that be if you could just say, hey, you know, instead of AWS, GCP, or instead of GCP today, whatever the other providers are, whatever, forget it, you know, as far as the actual list goes, you know, that is in theory what I think that they want you to do, but I think it would require probably a non-completely trivial workflow. And also the question is, like, let's say that you're running this for a production environment. How are you deploying this? You're not deploying it from somebody's laptop, probably. You got this on a build machine, probably. You've got this on Jenkins, or you've got this on I think even Circle CI. You've got to be running this from somewhere. So setting that up and getting that to play nicely with the different cloud providers is probably also a challenge, and especially without giving access to the entire world from there. So I mean, if you already pre-configured that, if you already gave it, for example, if you already gave your Jenkins build box, for example, if you already gave it your GCP and your AWS credentials and you lock them down to just be certain stuff, maybe it will be that easy. You know, I personally haven't tried it, to be honest. Good question, though. Really good question, and one that could make a lot of money, save a lot of money for some of us here. I hope woke everybody up. Money, saving money.
Does anyone have any other questions before I transition to my next stuff? Going once, going twice. All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for presenting. This was a great session. Lots of engagement.
Stop.
No, seriously, I'm not just saying. I mean, I'm
Keep
the
going.
guy who's doing this every month. I know when they go well, and this one went well, so thank you.
Thanks.
A couple more things I wanted to let everyone know. One, if you missed it in the beginning, I'm going to link both the Cleveland and the Canton tech Slacks one more time. So they're in the chat now. I'm going to be uploading this recording to YouTube, and I will post it to the event page if you want to go back and review, or if you, you know, arrived a little later or after we started and whatnot. If you have any friends that wanted to make it, but they couldn't make it, feel free to share that. Next month, we're meeting to talk DevOps again, but with Azure DevOps. So check out the page and RSVP to that if you're interested. It's building real world pipelines. Basically, you know, you have a mix of on-prem apps and like legacy stuff, and you have cloud native stuff, or you have some kind of weird hybrid microservice powered thing. So real world pipelines with Azure DevOps. It should be really fun. And then I wanted to plug the Cleveland React group. They're actually meeting in about 10 minutes. They're going to be talking about a testing framework called Cypress. So I'm going to throw that link in the chat as well. If you're up for another event, they're a great group run by two great guys, Dan Ott and Jonathan Knapp. I'm actually heading over there at 8. So if you're interested in React or testing in React, 8 o'clock, and the link's in the chat. So thank you everyone for attending tonight. That's the stuff. Message Michael in the Cleveland Tech Slack, connect with him on LinkedIn. maybe. I'm not sure how active you are on there, but yeah, thank you
A little
everyone
bit.
for
Alright.
attending.
Thank you, everybody.